Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a really profoundly personal journey. It sheds light on how beliefs, especially spiritual ones, can echo and evolve across generations. We've got a compelling set of sources, basically an autobiographical account from a Nepali writer.
Right. And what's truly insightful about this material, I think, is how Susan, who's a prominent Nepali writer, shares her deeply personal story. It's across a series of articles, and it gives us this rare window into how faith and maybe even superstition changes over 3 generations of women in her family.
Absolutely. So, our mission here for this deep dive is to really pull out the powerful nuggets of understanding from Susan's story. We're focusing on her mother, Krishna, Susan herself, and then her daughter, Asta. Trying to grasp how, early influences, big life events, and even these sort of ancient beliefs can shape our spiritual path. You might actually find yourself recognizing echoes of your own journey in hers. So we should probably start with Susan's childhood, right?
Yeah.
And the powerful influence of her mother, Krishna. How did that early environment plant those first seeds of spirituality in young Susan?
Well, the sources, they paint a really vivid picture of how Susan's mother, Krishna, didn't just talk about spirituality. She wove it into the daily routine through these consistent rituals. You have to imagine Krishna waking up super early before dawn to gather Purjat flowers, and specifically choosing only the ones that had already fallen, which, is a quiet lesson in itself about humility, maybe. All for puja, the devotional offering ritual.
Yeah.
Or just setting up the puja thali, the tray, with incense, lamps, barley sprouts. For little Susan, these weren't just abstract things. They were powerful sensory experiences that really built a foundation.
And that description of the Kali, then temple, it's so atmospheric, isn't it? The crowd, the sound of the bells, and how the source mentions those sounds resonated differently depending on every different hand and the desires of the mind. What does that detail tell us about how personal spirituality is, even in a really busy shared space?
Yeah, it speaks to a fundamental truth, I think. Spirituality can be collective, sure, but it's always ultimately deeply individual. And for Susan as a kid, God wasn't just some idea. The divine felt tangible, almost like a problem solver, a wish granter.
Right.
The sources mention her praying for simple kid things, good exam results, getting a favorite dress. It shows a very straightforward, almost you could say reciprocal relationship with God that lots of children have.
And music, too. That played a huge part. The kirtans and bhajans, those are devotional songs, right?
Yeah.
At Sensari Maithan. And particularly this harmonium player whose music was called a stairway connecting devotees to spirituality, making them realize the transient nature of life. That sounds like more than just listening. It sounds really immersive.
Totally immersive. And it brings up a fascinating question, doesn't it? About how much we absorb unconsciously. Susan herself reflected on it later. She said, "The seed of spirituality, unknowingly, my mother had sown in my childish mind. Krishna's consistent practices, lighting lack body that's thousands of lamps."
Wow.
Yeah, reciting the Ramayana, the Hindu epic, fasting. It was all this powerful, unspoken guidance. It laid groundwork that turned out to be pretty resilient.
But as strong as that foundation was, it wasn't unbreakable. What was the big event? The thing that caused Susan's spiritual path to take such a sharp turn?
The biggest catalyst really was her mother's illness, a long illness, and then her eventual death. The source really captures Susan's raw grief, that childlike perspective. It says, "My child's conscience saw all the blame on God. He took our mother away from us." That one devastating event just shattered her childhood faith.
Oh, it's just heartbreaking, that sense of betrayal, especially since she'd even fasted for Santoshimata, a goddess, hoping for her mother's health. And when her mother passed away anyway, despite those prayers, yeah, the source says it led to a strong aversion to God for Susan.
Exactly. And that void, that space left by loss, it got filled by something completely different, a new ideology. Susan got involved with a communist group. She found intellectual comfort, maybe validation, in philosophies like Marx's "religion is the opiate of the masses" or Nietzsche's "God is dead." These ideas gave her an intellectual framework for her shift towards atheism.
Okay, so she started seeing religion as orthodox, superstitious, and felt that science, physical science, held all the real answers instead.
Precisely. The sources are explicit. She practiced atheism well for a long time. But importantly, they also note that later on, she came to see the limits of science as the only answer.
Right.
And that little crack, that realization, sort of prepared her for the huge transformation that came next.
Right, and this is where it gets really fascinating. After being a committed atheist for a while, something pretty remarkable happened. A complete U-turn, the sources call it, in her spiritual view. What was that turning point?
Well, it was actually two deeply personal things converging. First, the birth of her daughter, and then later, a real life-or-death crisis involving that child. But the big U-turn really started with her daughter's birth.
And the source notes this incredibly powerful detail. Her daughter's face looks strikingly like her own mother, Krishna. What impact did that have on Susan?
That resemblance, it sparked this incredible, almost metaphysical light bulb moment for Susan. She describes it as realizing death is not a complete end, but a continuation, a cycle. This sudden, visceral sense of connection, of life continuing, it was truly transformative. And it's so fitting, isn't it, that she named her daughter Asta, which means faith. It's like belief itself was being reborn in her life.
That's amazing. And then there was that other strange detail. Meeting a woman who looked like her mother during a pilgrimage, the Char Dam pilgrimage.
Yes.
And the woman called her Beatty, daughter. Susan apparently felt that was metaphorical.
Yeah, I think it points to this ongoing search she was on for meaning and connection beyond just the rational, but the most direct, the most gut-wrenching experience that really cemented her shift that came during a medical emergency. Her daughter, Asta, got a dangerously high fever, life-threatening. And in that moment of pure desperation, Susan just found herself praying again, instinctively.
And this is where her whole idea of God seemed to just expand, didn't it? She didn't experience God as some invisible force up there, but in the actual tangible help from strangers, like a cyclist who stopped and a taxi driver who helped her during that terrifying emergency.
Exactly. And this led her to a really compelling insight. For her, divinity wasn't just in temples or grand ideas. It could be palpably present in everyday human kindness and timely help. It shows how, for some people, grace shows up in the most unexpected earthly ways. She even says something like, after becoming a mother, hardly any woman would remain atheist, suggesting this new sense of responsibility, this connection to life, just fosters a belief in something unseen.
So after all that, what does her spirituality look like now? What's her current view?
It seems much more expansive now, inclusive. She doesn't seem to limit God to one name or form. She uses concepts like unmanifested akshar, which is like the indestructible sound or element,
Okay.
the infinite Lord, the unknown existence, or even energy light. For her, the main thing isn't whether God is real or imaginary in the usual sense. Her spirituality now is about being guided towards truth continually. She puts it beautifully. My God is unknown, but also very manifest everywhere and everything.
That's quite a journey. But beyond spirituality, the sources talk about something else fascinating. How superstitions get passed down. What's the main example there?
Oh, it's definitely the Wednesday superstition. Susan's mother was absolutely convinced that starting any new project or work on a Wednesday would lead to failure, or at least frustrating delays. And this belief was so ingrained it just passed straight down to Susan. And then, remarkably, even to her daughter, Asta. Susan apparently would catch herself thinking, oh, this work is stuck. I must have started it on a Wednesday.
Huh. Okay, so what about Tuesdays? Was there an opposite?
There was. Tuesday was seen as auspicious. Tasks started on Tuesday were supposed to finish easily. So this contrast really highlights how specific these inherited beliefs can be and how much power they hold over daily choices.
But Susan doesn't just accept it as, like, blind superstition, does she? She actually questions it. She asks if it's superstition or if her mother's intuition was awakened or if she was psychic.
And that's a really crucial point she raises. She's essentially asking, is what we call superstition sometimes actually a form of intuition in her wisdom? She even gives examples where her mother's seemingly superstitious beliefs turned out to be weirdly accurate. Like predictions about her sons becoming doctors or engineers, or even knowing a specific black chicken would die. It suggests maybe a deeper subconscious knowing, or maybe just sharp perception at play.
And what I found really captivating was the cross-cultural link the source mentions, that even in Greek culture, there's a similar tradition of avoiding new work on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
That detail made Susan wonder about how universal these things might be, what deeper meaning they could hold. This generational recurrence, as the source puts it, of these specific beliefs, even seemingly odd ones. It's such a powerful theme in her story.
Absolutely. And what becomes really clear when you read Susan's articles together is that this is way more than just one woman's personal story. It really serves as a profound case study, you could say, of how family background, cultural values, and intensely personal experiences all weave together to shape someone's spirituality and beliefs.
So thinking about us, the listeners, what does this all mean for how we might understand spirituality itself?
Well, it definitely shows spirituality as something dynamic, right? Constantly evolving.
Yeah.
not static or fixed. It shifts, it grows with time, with experience, with our own development. And it gives us maybe a fresh way to look at superstitions, too. Maybe they aren't just irrational beliefs. Maybe sometimes they're rooted in intuition or some kind of subconscious, maybe even collective knowledge.
Yeah. And the sources point out that Susan has kind of come full circle in a fascinating way. She's ultimately embraced a spiritual path that really mirrors her mother's in many ways. Despite her earlier strong communist beliefs and focusing on politics over religion, it's just a powerful testament, isn't it, to how strong that generational influence can be, that almost 180-degree shift in her thinking,
Yeah.
symbolized by that little Ganesh idol she keeps. It's compelling. It resonates. This deep dive really drives home how our past, our parents, even our children, how they can all be such powerful forces shaping our deepest beliefs.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Susan's journey kind of challenges us, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, how much of what you believe today, right now, is genuinely your own discovery? And how much might be a subtle echo or maybe even a full-on embrace of the generations that walked before you?